Football for me, it means people. Everyone who's involved for the right reasons. They want to play because they love the game, they want to be involved, and it brings connection between everyone, whether it's standing on the sides, whether it's in the crowd, just watching and not playing.
And with football being for everyone, whether you're a coach, a player, an aspiring player for the future, someone seeking a scholarship, a teacher, a youth worker, a professional, a volunteer, someone seeking to get involved in the game, a volunteer parent, whether they're reflecting on their journey and how they can understand their grassroots team, an aspiring academy coach yourself, no matter what and no matter where you're listening, this podcast is really for you. On the Reflective Coach podcast, there are so many wonderful guests that feature on the podcast, whether this is former professionals, current professionals, and professionals of all backgrounds within the Coaching Insight series that really inspire, understand, support, and are reflective amongst this journey as they share their own insights, experiences, their own journey, their own reflections, strategies, insights, and other stories into the Reflective Coach podcast. Each week features a new guest, and each new guest brings something new to the podcast. I've been so lucky to have so many wonderful guests on, and you can really listen to all the episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Podcast Addict, with continuous updates on Twitter and LinkedIn. By subscribing, commenting, following, engaging with all the posts amongst social media, you can really keep up to date with all the episodes.
I try to really incorporate kind of the human side of things into my coaching, looking at, your players as people and not just what can they provide for you on the field, but I think if you're able to cultivate and build a good relationship with them off, that just enhances their performance. I do think there is that balance of, if I want to continue to progress and find, higher levels of places to go, how do you balance that with still trying to have some semblance of a connection and stability with a place that you're working at? And it is really cool to kind of look back and know that you have this relationship with them that is so different than what anybody else might have in their life, just because of the team and, you're together 24/7 and you're on road trips and, athletics just is such a microcosm of life.
But nice and early for you over in the States, which is great commitment from you. Fair play, can't argue that.
Well, I'm assuming you've been awake for a while, watching some games.
Well, I woke up this morning, I was like, well, I've got 4 hours until our call, so I'm like, all right, I've got a bit of time. But yeah, I've been up, I watched some of the final, which was not a bad game, considering. But have you caught any of it, the highlights or whatever?
I woke up and watched some of it. I saw probably most of the second half.
And when it comes down to, say, that extra 13 minutes then, they're 1-0 down England, for example, your heart is beating, you're racing, you've got an opportunity to win the World Cup, you've got an opportunity to win a trophy. And you can see Serena on the sideline like, oh, I really want to get this. And you can see like time is ticking away and being taken away from her. But it must be such a strange sort of position to be in when you're so close to winning it, but time is ticking away and you're not winning it because the team isn't getting forward because of how well Spain are playing.
Yeah, I can't imagine having 13 extra minutes added on to the end of the game when you're like, okay, well, that's enough time to do something, but if we haven't done anything thus far, what's going to change in these next 13 minutes for us? So they had a few right at the very end. I thought they were maybe going to sneak one in, but yeah, Spain did really well. They played great.
They did very well, and you could see sort of England being compact and sitting in a low block, and they were very good out of possession, and they were holding their shape very well. But Spain were just pulling them apart, keeping possession, moving side to side, and it was a great game of in defence and out of defence, and in attack and out of attack. So it was definitely a great game to watch for sure.
Yeah, I feel like we, at my school, like playing like Spain would obviously be the dream, right? You're connecting passes, you're just possessing the team to death. But then they have the quality up top to finish as well and actually get something from their possession. So I don't know if they learned their lesson against Japan where they grossly outpossessed them, but Japan beat them, 3-0, 4-0? So it obviously taught them something because now they're World Cup champs. So.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to it, obviously you've got a coaching perspective there, but you've also got to see a player perspective, because even when Ella Toon has been brought off, sometimes when you see players be brought off, they throw a little paddy or tantrum. But Ella Toon, you can see in her face like there was nothing more that she could give. And it's one of those where if Serena didn't make that change, she could be criticised for making it too late or not keeping Ella Toon on. But Ella could sort of look and go, right, someone else has got to come on. I've given 90 odd minutes or whatever it was, or 87. If I was going to score, I would have scored by now, but I haven't. So in that position, she can't really argue it. And it was good of her that you could see in her face was that she's given everything, but it's time to accept that, I can't do any more in this game and someone else has got to come on and do it for me.
Yeah, you love players like that aren't gonna, like you said, throw a tantrum when they come off and not gonna be mad, but either trust you as a coach and also trust their teammates that they can get the job done too. So fair marks for her. I liked the England team. Obviously, I was cheering for the U.S., but knew it would be a difficult feat for them to get the three-peat, especially just with kind of the combination of players they had. So would have loved to see England win it, but Spain was undeniably the better team. So
yeah. And it was such a great World Cup as well, because obviously you had England who were producing really well as usual. Spain have done well. Then Japan got some good results. Australia went on and had a great run. Nigeria and Randy from the US had done really well as well. And the only shame was that US came crashing out of it, and it sort of was opening up eyes in terms of perhaps US team have run out of steam right now. But overall, in terms of how the other teams and nations have sort of come up and been recognised, it's great for that recognition of the female game, but also those national teams as well, and the players that have really produced over this World Cup. So it's definitely been a great one for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And, even everyone, obviously the US bowing out was a big deal, but I mean, Germany didn't make it, Canada got knocked out, Brazil got knocked out. So I mean, those are also some big names that, like you said, just kind of opens the door for other teams. And yeah, my boss actually used to work with Randy, so we were big Nigeria fans here. He did a great job with them, so they were fun to watch.
Of course, and it's a difficult one as well, because if you're in England's position, you've got Lauren James who's been sent off and had a 2-game dismissal or ban. She's available then for the final because England have made it. But you've got an opportunity there to continue with the same team you've got in terms of Ella Toon, or you've got an opportunity to start Lauren James. So obviously the decision was Lauren James didn't start. But if you were in that position and you've got that sort of similar scenario whereby you've got such a quality player who could come back into the team, but you also got one who started in the teams in a good position, would you have made that same decision to have stuck with that player who's been producing in the semis? Or would you have gone, do you know what, I got the quality player back, I could actually utilise him here?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. I think part of it depends on the chemistry of your team. And I think as a coach, you can kind of try to read the room a little bit of, is the team behind this person that was able to play because this other person was out, and do you kind of ride that momentum and put them in there and give them the start, knowing you have this other person you can always bring on? I probably would have gone that similar route, just knowing, hey, if there's a momentum and there's an energy behind this, like, let's give her a run. And I know I always have this person that I can bring in if it doesn't go so well. I think you try to reward that player who has given you what you need for the last 2 games, and let them get the start and see what they do, knowing that, hey, if it gets a little sketchy, I've got this other person just in case.
And that's a good perspective to have an opportunity, but you're also on those weighing skills as well, because you either upset Lauren James, you drop one way, or you upset Ella Toon, you drop the other way. So you're in a sort of unwinnable position, but you need to sort of smooth it around the edges, whereby then they're ready to come on and they're willing. But it's a final, they want to take place, and if Lauren James got sent off, then that's a decision that she has to learn and live with, and understand that she missed the final through her own actions and that cause. And it's the same for any player that we work with. They're going to learn along the journey whilst they're there as well.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised she only got 2 games. So I guess if I'm her, I'm grateful that I'm even available to play in the final. But yeah. Also, I have a couple cats. They might try to make an appearance on camera. So if you see a feline run across the background, that's what that is.
That's not a problem at all. We always love a little cameo in the podcast. That's fine.
Love it.
So, yeah, if you wanted to give an introduction to yourself and where you're at, what you're doing, your experience, and what has led your coaching journey to where you're at today.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Brianne Barnes. Currently I work at Valparaiso University. It's a NCAA Division I school, Northwest Indiana, probably located an hour outside of Chicago. I've been here. This is my third season. Before that, I was an assistant at a Division II school in Ohio, which was also my alma mater. I played there, Cedarville University, and I was there for 10 years as a coach, and obviously 4 years as a player before that. Really, this has kind of been a good little jump for me going from Division II to Division I. It was a really great opportunity just to work with my current boss. We had a mutual friend through the club game, and so he was looking for an assistant, and I was kind of looking to continue to progress my career, and worked out for me. So I'm here now. But I just got back into the club game as well. I'll start coaching a club team this fall and spring. So I'll have they're going to be freshmen and sophomores in high school. So that'll be a nice little way to get back plugged in with the community. I took a couple years off when I moved, and that was a nice little break because, as you know, you just need a little pause every now and then. So so currently coaching both college and then a high school club team, and just enjoying that. I played goalkeeper in college, but I am not our goalkeeper coach, so just have the skills just in case. But we currently have another goalkeeper coach, so just enjoying the assistant life. And I try to really incorporate kind of the human side of things into my coaching, looking at, your players as people and not just what can they provide for you on the field, but I think if you're able to cultivate and build a good relationship with them off, that just enhances their performance on the field. And so really trying to be a mentor and a support and a person that they can kind of lean on, especially in college. It's a life changes a lot. You learn kind of who you are, and it's your first time away from your parents and your family. And so just being able to be there for them in that really formative period of life is something that I really enjoy. And I obviously like soccer, but I think just the relationship and the human aspect of it is kind of the highlight for me. So
I love that, and there's a lot within itself as well. Obviously, combining club with what you're already doing this year, so taking on more responsibility and more accountability and everything else that comes with that. As much as we love coaching, we've got more stakeholders to sort of be held accountable by and sort of deliver for. But then it's also that combination whereby you spent 14 years in an institution, and that's a long period of time to spend somewhere, both as a person and a professional. Transitioning from a player into sort of a vetted coach, as you will, and member of staff. And a lot of coaches that you talk to obviously have 3 years here, maybe 4 years, and by the time you've been at one club for 10 years, they could have had 3 or 4 different positions. But I think it's great whereby you've spent 14 years with that stability, progressing, learning, not only there, but also the institution growing within that period as well. So 10 years is a long time. There's a lot that you learn within that. And looking back on that, do you sort of look back going, do you know what, I wish I moved on after 7 years? Or do you think 10 years was a pinnacle whereby, 10 years is great, but as you said, now it's time to move on?
So the interesting thing about my 10 years there was actually with 2 different head coaches. So I started with the man who was my coach when I was a player, and we were together for 5 years, and then he retired, and they brought in a new head coach, and they really wanted him to keep me just kind of for the transition and stability. And then I ended up staying with him for 5 years. So I feel like I kind of got 2 different programs for the price of one, if you will, and was able to not have to get up and move and, find a new house and all that stuff. But I still got to experience working with 2 different bosses and kind of seeing the way that they run their programs and just their coaching philosophies. And so I think that really helped because, like you said, 10 years is a long time. But for me, I really look at it as I was sort of in 2 places for 5 years just because of the differences. And I did feel like at the end of the 10 years, I was definitely ready to find something else and to move on. Just me personally, I like to be somewhere for maybe 4 or 5 years to try to provide some of that stability and really help whoever my head coach is, but also the players. I think, like you said, a lot of people maybe will be somewhere 2 years, 3 years, and there's just always this revolving door. And I think for me, for someone who has the focus on the relationship side of it, it's hard to get that when you're always moving and always doing something new. And so, I try to make it my goal to kind of be somewhere 4 or 5 years. Can I see a class through? Can I recruit a kid and actually get to see them come play here instead of recruiting them and being like, I'm actually moving, see ya. So I do think there is that balance of, if I want to continue to progress and find, higher levels of places to go, how do you balance that with still trying to have some semblance of a connection and stability with a place that you're working at?
Again, there's so much within that, but then I absolutely love that because that's a great opportunity to sort of reflect and look upon, right, I've actually been in 2 different places for 5 years apiece. And I love that because, as you said, you've learned from 2 different coaches and sort of got that price for 2 for 1 because you've been able to learn from 2 different philosophies, 2 different styles, delivery, how they manage players and so on. So it's great progression to sort of learn from the coach that you had as a coach when you were a player, and then sort of go completely different where you've never met this person or someone who's got complete different sort of a flip of a script as such because they're doing something so different. And now obviously you're with a third coach which you're learning from, so it's been a great sort of transition and learning point in terms of how you've gone across from that, but it's also very nice, as you say, because you've been able to see players complete and see out a part of a program, whereas sometimes you move on and you don't get to see the end product of a player or player outcome, and that can be hard within itself. You can look back, get in touch with the coach, etc., but I think there's nothing better than seeing out, say, 5 years you've seen this player come in from this very young frigid person who's very raw to then being a maybe all-round complete product, or very close to being a complete product because they've learned from the program, learned about themselves and so on. So that's been nice to see. And when you sort of look back on your athletes and you've looked back on those individuals, what has sort of been a real good point where you can look back at, say, a handful or a few whereby, yeah, they've gone on and achieved X, Y, and Z, or these have done that? How's that sort of look for you upon that reflection point?
Yeah, I think I've been blessed to work with a lot of extraordinary young women. Like I said earlier, getting to kind of be there for them while they're figuring out who they are and what they want to be. Unfortunately, I've been there for them through some really difficult times. People losing parents, people having major surgeries, people just experiencing big losses. And so getting to kind of see them really grow through that adversity, and now they're very successful young women. I had players who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are teachers, business women, engineers, and so all sorts of things. And it is really cool to kind of look back and know that you have this relationship with them that is so different than what anybody else might have in their life, just because of the team, and you're together 24/7 and you're on road trips, and athletics just is such a microcosm of life where you lost a game and that's really tough. What's going to happen when you lose a job, or a relationship ends, or something bigger happens? And so getting to kind of use athletics to sort of map out how one might be responding and one might be able to kind of respond to the things that happen. It's been cool to be able to look back and say, yeah, I remember when, you made this terrible play in this game and you cost us the game, but, you bounced back, you took ownership of it. You vowed like that's never going to happen again. And it didn't. And how does that translate to now you're a doctor and you have to literally save people's lives? Your decision could save or lose their life. And so just knowing that like tiny little soccer game might have helped prepare them for that type of situation. So yeah, I'm really proud of all my former athletes. I mean, there's a lot of them, a lot more than I probably can think of and remember just numbers wise. But yeah, no, it's been great. And like I said, I've coached a lot of really exceptional people, and they're doing a lot of great things. So.
And that's great to hear. And they're obviously very lucky that they had you as a coach and able to understand when they've gone through, times of adversity and maybe the low points, that they've had you there to support them. And that continuity as well, because, you could have moved on within that time and then they've sort of got to share their problems with someone else or someone who might not understand them as much. But it's great that you also say where you've been able to see them progress on to maybe being a doctor or into a professional world and have success elsewhere, because, depending on how you flip that script again, on the outcome of data, if you're an institution at 10 years, they could go, right, you've had, say, 400 athletes, 0.9% of them have gone on to play professional soccer. In terms of that looks like a failure within itself. But if you flip that script again and you've gone, right, these are doctors, these are that, these are employed, then the percentage is going to be huge. So therefore, your actual success is, right, combine that percentage with that, right, we've hit like 98% success rate because they've all gone on and achieved something. So it's not always the perception of the way the data comes across or the perception of, oh, right, only X, Y, and Z made it as professional soccer players. Because actually, if you're looking at someone who's gone on to achieve, say, a PhD and then they've become a doctor, the absolute foundations that you've put in place to enable them to go on and do something like that and achieve a profession which is highly regarded just shows what support you're giving them in terms of being a person, how they can study, how they structure that time that's given to them, dealing with adversity, dealing with working within teams and everything else that you give to them. That is such huge success within itself. So it always frustrates me the way that the game comes across, because we look at it objectively rather than subjectively. But obviously what you're doing there in that 10-year period just on itself, without looking into where you're at now, just shows how much of an impact you've had on the game and how much of an impact you've had on these individual lives. And it's been great where they've had those outcomes and where they're at now.
Yeah, and I think, being my former university was, we were Division II, so we're not, the big schools that probably everybody in the UK has heard of. And so there wasn't really the expectation that, I could be a professional soccer player. I think there were some who definitely, if they'd wanted to, could have, but they were really using it as a means to just get their education paid for, in some senses. And so I think coming in and knowing, hey, I have something on the other side of this that's not just going to be soccer, football. I want to go to med school. I want to get my PhD. I want to, have a family and raise kids. It kind of takes that pressure off, I think, of soccer is everything, because they have this whole other side of things that they want to do. And so it's just sort of trying to look at it as like, well, we have the gift of the game for 4 years, and how can we really maximize it, knowing that you're probably not going to be playing at this high of a level ever again once you graduate. And so, yeah, like you said, if you look at it as just who went on to play professionally, yeah, the numbers would be bleak. But I think when you look at successful adults, it would be much, much greater.
I love that. And, obviously, when it looks at those bleak results, that's an unfair, position to review on someone, and certainly a program itself. But when you say you have all these individuals and they've gone on to be doctors or they've gone on in other professions, do you have a sort of percentage or a calculation or a way where you review whereby how many are still accessing the game or still playing, and looking at it from beyond what you're doing in the program, just from a, entirely maybe nosy point of view, or going, right, yeah, we want to just see what these are up to?
Yeah, I think social media obviously allows you to keep in touch with most people. Being able to go back for a homecoming or a reunion, you can kind of touch base and see what people are up to. I would say there's a good number of them who still play, just like rec soccer. There's a few who got into high school coaching or club coaching in addition to whatever their other careers are. There've been a few who've done some volunteer work at the college level. So I would say a good number of them are still around the game, or even, this is kind of depressing for me, and so a lot of them are old enough to have kids who are now playing soccer. So even like being the soccer mom for their kids, helping coach those teams. So yeah, I think they they stay involved in the game. They definitely still watch the game. I don't have any hard numbers on how many or what the percentages are, but I would say the majority of them still at least stay connected to it in some way, which is encouraging.
And again, encouraging and great to see, because, you know, you think that they've gone through a program, they've gone through that commitment, they've, you know, chosen a college to get there. And sometimes, you know, life doesn't always work out, or sometimes you might study a degree and then we might end up not utilizing it in a way because we've ended up delving into a different part of our careers. But for those who still remain part of the game, whether they're playing recreationally or they've picked up, you know, a soccer coaching role in addition to their career, I think it's great that they remain part of the game, because when you look at the numbers who actually come through in terms of the game, then they slim down in terms of those who go on to college, then they slim down again for those who make a professional or gain further scholarship, and then for those who actually don't remain a part of the game, then that's quite a high number. So when you look at those who remain part of the game for recreational purposes or in those other coaching positions or remain in a game at some point, then it's great to see that, because it's so hard to see how many players actually start out to then how many actually remain in the game beyond their 20s and beyond college and university, etc. Because it's quite harrowing when, you know, say for example here in the UK, we've got all these players who start out in the grassroots, then they might go into a development centre, then that's slimmed down for the academy, and then when they get selected for their scholarship, then that's slimmed down again. Then you've got those who might be professional, and then the numbers who are coming out are very, very bleak. So then how many of those numbers are actually remaining a part of the game and beyond that in terms of that? So there's someone that I spoke to on the podcast recently, and she's got a great study into that around how many players actually remain part of the game. So I'm looking forward to that. But just on that thought process over that 10-year period, just thinking of the combination of players that you've actually seen and coached over that period of time, it's just interesting how many are remaining in the game in somewhat capacity. But it's also great that they're going on and having lives and doing well within that as well. So for me, it just wraps up that when you speak to coaches, people might think, oh, right, another coach on the podcast, etc. But it's not. It's someone who does so much more than coaching. And as you say, that human side is so important, because you're having such success with them. And it's great to see how many individuals have gone on above and beyond. And, you know, it's not just about the X's and O's, as I keep hearing. It's not just about the tactics, but it's so much off the field as well, which is truly great.
Yeah, and I think obviously the way the world is now, there is a much greater focus and awareness on people's mental health and sort of that side of the game. But I think people can kind of just use those as catchphrases and not actually really care. You know, they can say, oh yeah, we care about your mental health, but we're going to expect you to do this, and we don't care if this happens, and this, and this. Whereas do your actions actually back up, oh yes, I care about you as a person. So if you come to me and you're super stressed about a test you have to take, and you're going to just have a complete breakdown unless you can go and study a little bit more, okay, I'm going to let you go study a little bit more. Like it's going to be fine. And you know, we just had so many players who are so overwhelmed with just all the other things that are, all the other expectations that are being put on them. You know, you got to be a good student. You've got to be a professional athlete, basically. At this level, you've got to, you know, still have a social life. You've got to try to figure out who you're going to be as a person. I mean, that's just a lot going on. And so anything that we can do to kind of help them learn how to manage it, help them come up with some coping mechanisms for all that stuff. And also just being a good support and, you know, helping them when they don't quite know how to help themselves. That's kind of what we're trying to find that balance. There's a responsibility of, yes, you agreed to be a part of this team and you need to be at trainings, you need to be at games and things like that. But at what point does the other things kind of overtake the importance of the game? And so just trying to walk that line, I think.
And there's a lot of great components within that, and there's a great question there that you've just asked, because, you know, as many coaches that I feel that listen to this or should be listening, you know, it's about how can you give players much more than what's on the field. So if you're giving them a coping strategy or coping mechanisms, then you're really allowing them to look at how they can approach a game. So, for example, if we flip it back to where this final was today, and you had to sort of set your team up, then, right, how many of them are actually coping? How many of them got anxiety? How many of them are getting overwhelmed? How many of them are utilising coping strategies? Right, are they utilising what we put in place? How can we support them? And how can we obtain as many key ingredients as we can to try and be as successful that then enables the tactics and the framework to be delivered on the pitch whereby we can have the best outcome. And therefore, if we fall short of that best outcome, which is winning, then how can we continue that unity amongst the team? How can we stretch beyond this tournament and move on back to our games to realign and refocus towards winning the next one? And that's an important transition itself, how you come away from such a low point into, right, let's go again and let's move forward collectively. But that just, wraps up and re-rounds in terms of, how many ingredients can we put in place, but utilising support and coping strategies and player support and that one-to-one and everything that we can do for a player to enable them to really define and help themselves in that approach towards being successful.
Yeah, we have at my current at Valpo, we have he's a sports performance kind of mental performance coach that we work with. His name is Derek. He's based out of Seattle, but one of the things that one of his main kind of things he talks about is just the idea of what's important now. So after something has happened, whether something good or something negative, in the game, out of the game, after this incident occurs, you need to ask yourself what's important now. And that can kind of help you with that, starting to process what needs to be happening, what is important, the stress and the anxiety that I'm feeling about what just happened. Can I change that? Or what's important now? Now I need to advance and maybe make this decision. Or, I mean, thinking of it in very simple, like soccer game standpoint, you had the ball, you lost the ball. Okay, what's important now? Well, what's important now is maybe I need to drop and recover because my teammate's going to step. Or maybe I need to be the one who goes and steps. And so getting your mind shifted from beating yourself up about the fact that you lost the ball or feeling like, ugh, I did it again, or crap, everything's falling apart. If you can take a moment to remind yourself what's important now is they have the ball. How do we get it back? And so I think that's been really helpful for our players, just kind of getting that shift, which sounds so simplistic, but in the moment, you have this swirling vortex of anxieties and disappointments and feelings, and like, how can you kind of center yourself and think ahead to, okay, what's important now? And so that's one thing I know that has really helped our team, and we've tried to incorporate even in games, like, all right, we just gave up a goal. What's important now? We just scored a goal. What's important now? And so that's kind of been a catchphrase I know our team has used a lot, and Derek has been really helpful with them in just kind of trying to shape the mental side of the game and rehearsals and planning and imagery, reflecting on, post-game and post-practice reports that you go through and kind of evaluate how did you do and how things went for you, has been very helpful, I think, to our players. So that's something that it's a little more performance driven, but it does address kind of like the mental side of things.
And I think that mental side of things is obviously so important. As you said, mental health is growing more than ever, but that mental side is absolutely so important. And that's something which is part of my philosophy, part of my coaching style, part of my framework, because I have such a huge focus on the mental side before I get to the tactics. So, some people go tactics, then mental side, whereas me, it's mental first. But I think, even though you said simplistic, I think it's absolutely... Yes, it is, because you're asking just such a straightforward question. And then, within that moment, if you've got a scenario and you've been able to rehearse something, then you take that into a game situation, you're going to look around and be like, right, this is familiar. Boom. How can I be repetitive in this? Or how can I repeat what I've done in practice in terms of a game situation? Then I'm going to cope better. And therefore, the successful outcome is going to increase because of what we've been able to rehearse. So for that player, that pattern recognition in terms of that rehearsal becomes beneficial. And therefore, it allows them to mentally cope, focus, and then do what they need to do technically and then tactically. But then depending on how far you want to go with it, you can develop that in terms of a framework and that performance-driven result as well on top of your, say, tactical framework, because you could lead it right down a rabbit hole. Then you create a mental framework within itself whereby, right, these are the coping strategies, this is our mental processes, these are how we ask questions, this is the terminology. And that terminology, just even by asking that kind of question or the way that you frame things, can be really important then for helping a player understand. And then again, they're taking that away into their professional livelihood, etc. But just here and now, just having those components and that terminology in terms of how you define something is so important. And I was delivering a session the other day, and I was talking to a coach I've never coached with before, and we sort of had some mutual contacts where we've studied on our B license together. So we were just talking about that, sort of building that bridge. And when we got talking, he said, one of them said, just even by saying the word unlucky in a session, you're giving a player false hope or false understanding that they've done something well, but they've just fallen short of it. So then by force of habit in the session, I went unlucky there, and I was like, ooh, he actually said that to me, and I was like, is that a good or a bad thing? Because depending on how you frame that and how you want that to fit within a player component in terms of that mechanism, how they process, is unlucky a good thing or a bad thing? So just by saying the odd word here or there, or just that terminology can stretch out so far beyond.
Yeah, I have a lot of coaches. I have a lot of friends who are coaches in other sports, and they do not understand unlucky. They're basketball coaches, and they would always come to our games and say, I hear you guys saying unlucky, but in no other sport do we ever attribute anything to it just being unlucky. But I'm like, yeah, but like sometimes it's the right idea, and sometimes it's everything works out, but maybe they just got a touch, so it's just unlucky. You did everything right, but this happened. So it's just funny when you said that, I thought of them not understanding. So then they try to say it, and I'm like, no, you're not using it properly. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point of, are we creating not an excuse, but like we're creating just the like you said, oh, something went wrong, you did something wrong, and now they're thinking about that instead of thinking about, okay, what's the next thing I need to do to make it work out, and not trying to look at it. We try to get our players to worry about process versus results. And if your process is good and your process is at a high level, then the results will follow. And so sometimes the process is, you do everything right in the process, but you don't get the result. Does that mean you were a failure? No, it just means, okay, the next time I've got to drive my process a little bit higher. I've got to maybe tweak a few things, but it doesn't mean that the process is bad or that you failed. It's just, I didn't get this result I wanted. Because as you know, soccer's a cruel game where you dominate a team for 90 minutes and they score a goal in the last 30 seconds, even though you had a ton of chances. Do you say, well, you guys were trash today because we lost the game? No, you probably played pretty well, but obviously you didn't play. Obviously something broke down that you weren't quite able to get the goal that you needed, but it doesn't mean that all the process was bad. It just means it needs to be a little refined, and maybe there was a breakdown somewhere that we could go back and try to fix or reevaluate. But if you get too hung up in the results, then it turns into, okay, well, the way to be successful is we're just going to be route one, super direct, and that's how we get results. Well, that's not really fun for us. Like, we don't want to play that way. We don't want to be like that. So if you can try to separate process and results, that can help with people's mental health and their framework as well, because they're not basing everything off of, well, did I win the game? Did you have a good performance? Did you do things the way we asked you to do them? Okay, what do we need to do to now try to get the result? But it doesn't mean that everything you did was bad because you didn't get the result.
Absolutely, I love that, and I think that's great within itself, separating performance away from results at times, and how you can look at that. And just even upon that reflection, and when you were talking then, that question of what's important now, or what can we do now, and have that two different strands. Just even that stepping stone beyond, because even just by saying unlucky, you're sort of going, right, unlucky, stop, bang. They've got nothing else to process, and therefore they're reflecting upon what they haven't done. But therefore, you could actually have that conversation during that terminal feedback, or during that transition when you're getting drinks or something. You were unlucky there, but what's important now when you've done that, or what was important then, is that you could have actually got the ball, picked it up, turned, and slid it off, for example. Just that little opportunity to readdress that situation, whereby you don't actually have to stop at that period of time. You could, but then you could also have it during terminal feedback. And just giving that extra bit of mental process and information, whereby when they're thinking about, right, unlucky, but I need to do this, you're actually stretching beyond. Because if we actually done a study and, evaluated 10 coaches over a course of a year, and we just tallied up how many times they said unlucky. Then we had a talk with a player, what they thought about it at the time. Then how much information was processed. I think in terms of that study itself, which sounds an interesting one that I've just made up, what are the actual outcomes in terms of that we're having over a course of the season? So for just a reflection point there for any coach listening or anyone else listening, when you sort of just say, the odd word or the odd term, think about how much more it could be extended, or think about how much more you could extend it into a mental thinking process by these two questions which Bria's posed to us. And, I think that's so important in terms of, again, that repetition and rehearsals, whereby that comes into practice, and in terms of what you're doing mentally with players is so important. It's great to hear what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's, along with that, a goal of mine for this season has been to be more direct in any type of coaching point that I give. And so it kind of, something you said made me think of it, is how many times do we get stuck just kind of word vomiting things, or just saying unlucky comes out, or, you state the very obvious to your player, like, hey, you need to put that on frame. Okay, obviously they know they need to put it on frame. So trying to be more direct in giving them something that's helpful. So instead of telling them, hey, put it on frame, maybe I say, hey, listen, try to strike the ball, strike through your laces this time. Or you're like, hey, shake that shot to the back post, instead of just trying to hit it as hard as you can. So just trying to give them more specific information instead of just letting whatever is coming over me in the moment, like, come out to them. Because reflecting upon my own coaching, I know there's times where you kind of turn into like the cheerleader coach, where, you're just like, hey, good job, like, you're doing this, or like, go push over there. And you're not actually giving them any information. You're just kind of becoming white noise. And so just trying to pick intentional moments to say a very direct thing to them, as opposed to just becoming a cheerleader, which I'm not against cheerleading at any points. Like, there are times your team needs you to hype them up and things like that. But, just for me personally, that's a focus of mine this season, is how can I give much more specific things to my players? And maybe that means, like you said, it's a dead ball situation. Can I pull somebody over and just say, hey, this last time you did this time, instead of running alongside that girl, can you take your touch across her body so that you get between her and the goal, and she has to follow you, so you get us a pen or you get us a free kick, as opposed to just saying, like, hey, that was a good run, you'll get her next time. That's not giving her anything to try to focus on or to correct maybe with what she did. So you're mentioning of just, like, thinking about the words we're saying, that kind of sparked that. That's a goal of mine for this year. So made me think of that.
I love that, and I think that's great within itself, and the way that you posed that scenario or situation and the extra information that you've given there. And again, cheerleading is something whereby we can learn and move out of as coaches, because, I remember being on a coaching course and they're saying, just by saying good within the session, so, they made a pass, oh, good, or good here, good, and then the amount of times you're saying good ends up becoming white noise. So over that period of time, it's like, right, that's good, because you're giving little elements, and for, say, younger kids, that might be really good to pick up their confidence, etc. But then as you get more technical with players as they go up through the ages and phases, then just by becoming that white noise, you're not really extending on the information that you need to give them. So that's where the real technical piece comes in terms of how you step up in terms of a coach beyond those ages and progress. So just another consideration point for those listening. But I think that's a great reflection in terms of how much we say, what we say, how we say it, how much information we're extending on, and how much players are taking away. And obviously over the course of the season, the amount of information that we give players over training and games and then maybe away from the field is very high as well. But how much of that are they actually captured or been able to retain? So it's important to have capture points and opportunities to ask questions and to rebuild on top of opportunities to really ask these questions of how much they've been able to retain, or ask questions where they can retain it even more. So that's another consideration point, because over a season we're given so much information.
Yeah, and I think you try to have that balance of repetition is going to help them remember it, but if they just are regurgitating the words that you say and they don't actually understand the point you're trying to make, then have you really succeeded in instilling that into them? And so, I think that's something we try to balance of, hey, if we ask our players, what are our individual attacking foundations? Okay, they can recite all of them to you, play the deeper leg, scan, body profile, like all those things. But then actually getting them to be able to demonstrate it and do it, in a rondo or in the game, then they've actually learned it. But if they just can recite it to you, I don't know if you've necessarily achieved your goal of trying to get them to do it. So it's taking that head knowledge and translating it into actual action on the field. But like you said, can you balance the amount of information that you're giving them? And I think for us in my current team, Valparaiso is a pretty tough academic school, and so we've got players who are biochem double majors, who are engineers, who are business majors, and so they're having to retain a lot of information in the classroom. But the way that we want to play and our style also requires them to think a lot and to mentally analyze and break down tactics and things like that. And so, we're trying to find the balance of what's going to be too much, or, maybe we haven't done a lot of things physically, but they're just mentally fatigued because we're asking them to think so hard in training sessions. And, we're finishing up preseason. And so it's really been an interesting couple weeks of just trying to balance how they're feeling both physically, but also just from the mental taxation that they might be feeling, especially freshmen, all the things that are getting thrown at them, and all the life changes they're experiencing as freshmen, and living in dorms for the first time and being away from their parents and all those things. So just trying to keep in mind, what is their overall readiness to perform. Maybe they feel great physically, but if they're just wiped out on the mental side, like, it's not going to go well in a training session. And so I think just for us, that's something we try to consider, because we know we're asking them to think a lot. Their professors are going to ask them to think a lot. How do we try to keep them in a good place?
And again, I think that's really important as well in terms of, players understanding what's being asked of them and being said, because, we might be giving out that type of information, or we might be saying something and they might understand it and might be able to recite it, but they might not understand it. And I remember just coaching a player when he was at under 9s, under 10s. And I remember over a course of a session, over a number of weeks, I've been delivering a training. And this word that I've been saying, I can't remember the word, but I can remember the context. But I remember saying a word, and I remember giving out lots of information. But obviously he wasn't retaining it or taking it on board because he was focusing on what he was doing technically. So this noise where some of the other players were taking it on, it was just going straight over his head. And I remember in a game where I said something to him 3 or 4, maybe 5 times. And I remember speaking to his mum after. She's like, I'm not sure he really understands it. So again, we've done the same process over the week. We readdressed it in training. And then a week after, I said it to him 3 or 4 times. And then I got to a point where I stood on the sideline during a game. I was like, do you actually understand what I'm saying here? And he went, no. But he was just like, every time I was giving him information, he was nodding. So little things like that, just say, do you understand? There's nothing wrong with doing that, because some players are scared in a scenario or situation to come out and say, actually, what does that mean? Especially in a group with, say, 21 other players on the field, and they've got to stop and ask, because they feel as if they're the ones getting it wrong and everyone else is beyond them, because everyone's trying to progress for their own individual needs, because they all want scholarships or beyond, or they're trying to progress in other ways, but they don't want to be the one to ask, because then they might seem weak compared to those, because they're at a competitive performance situation. But just even the other day, I was delivering a session to under 19 girls and seniors, because I was asked to train both of them together. And I said, right, we're going to do an SSG now. And they all turned around and said, what's an SSG? It's like, it's just a small-sided game. So just simple terminology that I take away from me, and just like, right, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Perhaps even at an older age, they've never had that in terms of their coaching pathway, that they're like, what's that? And I was actually quite happy that they asked me. But just simple things that, that assumption that players always understand what we're going to give them, or they're at a level whereby they're coming in now that, yes, they maybe should have an entry level of information understanding, but they're not always going to understand the depths of it, and hence why they're on a program to be here to learn and take on board why we're coaching and teaching what we're doing upon this syllabus.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've experienced this with your players. Our players really like things to be black and white. And we just have to keep reminding them, well, soccer is just a lot of gray. There's just a lot of gray on the field. You know, if I tell you we're being pressed, how do we break the press? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into how you're going to break it. Where's the press coming from? How many people are pressing you? You know, is it just one line of pressing or two lines pressing? And so I can't just say to you, when you get pressed, you do this every time and it'll be successful. Because what might work in this case isn't going to work if they're pressing me like this. And so sometimes our players get hung up on, well, you told me if this is happening, this is what I should do. Well, yeah, and in that scenario, that's what you should have done. But, you know, it's just all, things are always changing. The game's always changing. And so I'm trying to get you to have the information in your head to know and be able to assess, okay, this is what's going on, so this is what I need to do. Because I can't just, you know, I can't like video game control you from the sideline to recognize like, oh, they're pressing with two and they're pressing our fullback and our center back. So what do you need to do? Like, you just have to kind of be able to know it. And so I think that's something we've been working through with our players is there's not just one correct answer. And I can't tell you every time that this is what the right answer is. It's a lot of gray. And so I don't know if that's just an American problem or if that's a universal problem, but that's something we've encountered a lot with our players.
I think that's something that I've seen as well, depending on what group. But, you know, whether players like that black or white or you know, oh, you told me this or I expected this to happen because we framed it in training. I was like, but now you actually have to problem solve and critically analyse the situation because as much as I've given you that information and rehearsal of what you could do, it's not always going to play out like that when it transitions into that actual game. So you have to be in that area whereby you can actually mentally process and be able to think, right, how can I problem solve here? And even if Coach Luca isn't here, then it's on me to do so. So I completely agree on that point as well. And you know, I delivered the training session on Tuesday. We worked within third, so we had attacking and defence, and midfield third. And the players couldn't move out of their areas; they had to be within them. So they were quite opposed within that, and it was a two-way game. And it was just usual, you know, if you scored, then balls back in play and so on, just play off the keeper. And so there was an overload in midfield and say blues versus whites. And one of the blue players was overloaded, so she was part of an underload. And she was saying, right, there's too many players here, I'm actually not coping with this. Or, well, she didn't say she wasn't coping with it, but she was articulating that she wasn't. And she wasn't happy that she was being overloaded, and therefore her intensity and work rate actually dropped quite low. But she was a very good technical player when we transitioned on. I was like, you're actually really good. It was the first time I was coaching them, I was like, you're actually really good. I love what I saw. But just even within that practice there of delivering that, when she was overloaded, it became overstimulated for her to sort of process, and therefore she wasn't able to cope, and therefore hence why her work rate dropped down. Whereas if I consistently or continue to consistently deliver that type of session, I want to see her dominating that midfield third. I want to see her absolutely controlling. And then when we transition, I want to see that continuous transition and growth of whereby she then dominates up and down the field, box to box, and how that looks over a course of a time. So sometimes when we deliver sessions, we can actually see from a player excelling to actually de-accelerating in terms of how they're excelling at one point and then how that de-escalates. Because then it's an opportunity for us to really identify and define, right, this is where we need to go with that player and how we can do this with a team. So sometimes, you know, we might see a player excel and then they might come back down to rock bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, hopefully it's kind of a 2-step forward, 1 step back, and then you're going to take 2 steps forward. So you're still ascending, but, you know, we know and understand, like, some days you're not going to be great. And if we want to continue to push the level, you know, we have to make it harder and harder so that there will be times that you struggle. But if you can master that or figure out the ways to solve it, okay, now we've climbed that next part of the mountain, and it's not going to get easier the higher you get. So it's got to keep getting harder and harder to make you better and better. And I think sometimes they just want it to be easy and fun, but we're trying to help you. It's going to be easy and fun when you get up there and realize, like, wow, look at where I came from to look where I am now. But they don't always look back. So
I love that. And obviously, there's a lot that comes into that, obviously, mentally, technically, tactically, and psychosocial. And we again, you said about assessment and actioning things on the field, problem solving, and being able to critically analyze. So when it comes down to it, do you have sort of like a data point or data opportunities, or do you have reflections or times when you go, right, this is an assessment period, and then we calculate numbers, we get an overall score, and then we do it, say, 3 or 4 times over the course of the season? Or is that just something that you take on board to see in an observation, have conversations as a coaching group? How do you sort of assess that over a course of a season to see how players have grown across those 4 pillars?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, there are a few kind of natural breaks. Obviously, the first couple weeks of preseason, that's a lot of what we're doing is assessing and analyzing players. New players are being plopped into an environment. How do they handle that? How do they fit in with kind of what we expect our players to be able to do? There's a bit of trying to see the potential of, okay, this person's not quite there yet, but they're able to do this, and this, and maybe with a little bit more time, they'll be able to complete all the things we want. So I think preseason is one where we're definitely very conscious of trying to analyze and trying to keep our eyes on people. We kind of break our season up. Obviously, we have our non-conference games, so the first part of our season where we're just playing any other Division I teams, and we kind of look at that as a separate season, and then we get into our actual conference play. And so I would say through the non-conference, we're still kind of continuing to evaluate and see, and maybe have a little bit of fluidity in trying to sort out who could be a good fit here, or what if we move this person here. And then once you get into the conference season, we really want to have things a little bit more set. And just knowing, like, okay, this is the group that performs pretty well together. We know that we can have this look and this look if we bring in these people. But I do think as the season goes through, you're giving those players kind of the chance to grow into their position and grow into being on the team. And so I think we do evaluate throughout the year. We have a very open door policy. If our players ever want to come in and chat with us kind of about things they're not understanding, or if they want to break down film, we record all of our training sessions. So even if they're not playing in games, we have training sessions to kind of break down with them and say, okay, in this small-sided game, the objective was for our midfielders to help us break this line, and this is how you did in that. And so maybe these are some things that are still shortcomings, or, hey, if we look back a couple weeks ago, you were doing it at a pretty low level, and now it's gotten better. It's still maybe not where that person who's a starter is, but you have made progress. So I think we do try to continuously evaluate. As far as data points, more of the, so we use Player Maker, which are like the little sensors that you wear on your boots. And so that helps us, that can give us information on like ground covered, touches, the balance between your right and left. So there are some data points that we can look at through that to say, hey, here's our starting 6, and these are their numbers, and these are where your numbers are at. So you can see, like, they do, X number amount more of touches during a game, or they cover this amount of distance in the game. And so right now, like, you're just not at the level that they're at. So how can we help you get to that? Or, even just maybe giving them that information to say, like, hey, this is, you've made progress, but like this person's still ahead of you. So sometimes that makes them feel better. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, sometimes people don't like hearing like, oh, well, that person's just better than me. But, we want to be honest. I personally, I don't know if you know Brene Brown. I love Brene Brown. But one of her expressions is, clear is kind. And being as clear as possible with people and not trying to spare their feelings, quote unquote, by just beating around the bush and not giving them information, I think ends up being more detrimental in the end. And so I think we try to be clear and honest with our players and deliver information in a way that is kind, but also they know exactly like where they are. because I don't think there's anything worse than a player being like, well, my coach never talks to me, so I never know. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, or I don't know what I can be improving on, or I don't understand why they're making this decision. Well, we want to be able to have those conversations with our players, knowing at the end of the day, they might not understand our thought process, but at least we like had a conversation with them about it. So I guess to get back to your question, we try to break the season down into different segments. And then obviously when we get to the spring, that's for the NCAA, that's our, our off season, our non-championship season. And so that's really the time you see a lot of growth, because we're not worried about matches. We're just doing a lot of training. Upperclassmen, they're not involved because like they're done. So it's really a time for those freshmen and sophomores to get a lot of reps and hopefully be able to kind of just have more time to progress. And so the spring is a big time that we try to evaluate as well.
What a great answer, and there's so much again within that, but I think that's great in terms of what you do. And sometimes it is hard to be kind, but being kind is for the best as well. And just giving those honest data points, because the data does back you up, and it's hard to say in the game because we're focusing on that data, but that data really helps, because here in the UK, I know a lot of players who've been released from professional clubs, and it's just been a very basic, one side of A4, didn't do this, didn't do that, and boom, they've had 4 points, and that's why they've been released. Whereas there's no actual data or no actual information that actually backs up that or details that for a player to go away and work beyond. So, if a player's lacking on the amount of distance covered over a period of time, and they've been evaluated on that, and therefore they've lacked minutes because a player's been selected over them, then why is that? All right, is it their fitness? Is it their mental approach? Is it the position that they're playing in? So then there are all the technical things that someone could work on with them away from that environment to try and come back or reevaluate. But I think it's great in terms of how you do that and how that's backed up, and just having those honest conversations. At least then the player can walk away in a couple of years' time, or at least look back when they're older and their mental frame has actually expanded, and they're able to look back and go, "Oh, I'm actually glad that was said to me," or "I'm glad that happened at this point." And they may not realize it now, but they'll realize it in the long term. I think it's also good that you talk about you might see more growth in the off season, because you might evaluate players in terms of, right, we've had X amount of training, we've had X amount of games, so therefore their fitness should be at absolute peak. Well, actually, no, their fitness could actually be at their lowest, because they're overtraining, they're overplaying, they're doing one-to-one sessions, they're doing things in their downtime, so therefore actually all their levels start to fall. Whereas in the off season, that's a good point as well, because sometimes people think it's the other way around, and therefore in the off season it's going to be lower, etc. But when it comes down to these segments in the season, how you split that up, do you set an overall season objective for how that looks over a course, or do you go, right, this segment is this objective, then that segment's this one, and then the final one is this one? How do you sort of portray or look at that, or do you not use objectives at any point? How do you sort of approach that sort of scenario?
Yeah, I think for our staff, I mean, obviously I'm the first assistant, so it is like our head coach. It's his program. We all work together, but I think we try to look to, well, where do we want to end up? Like, what's our ultimate goal? What's our ultimate dream for this season, for this year? For us, our goal for this season is we want to make it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. So that means we've won our conference championship. We've beaten probably a very, very good team in the first round, because we'll probably be a lower seed because we're just a mid-major. We've beaten a really, really good team, and we've made it to the second round. So, you're playing against Notre Dame and Michigan's and Northwestern's, like big schools. And so for us, that's what we've been talking a lot with our team and with our players, and even amongst ourselves as a staff. What is it going to take to have our team look like a team that's playing in that weekend? And that kind of covers obviously your tactics, that covers your mentality, that covers the physical standpoint. Within that, there are obviously certain results-based things that you have to achieve in order to get to that. But there's so many other things that go into it. And so for us, that's kind of what we've set for this season as what our big goal is. And so our focus throughout these first couple of weeks has just been, how do we get our team to look like a team that's playing in that environment? And so, like I said, we've had talks about what does our mentality need to be? We had an exhibition game against the third ranked team in the country, and we didn't win, but we took so many positives away from it. And that team's probably a team we'd have to play in the first round. So for us, it's a good kind of gauge to say, hey, we played this team on August 12th. What could we look like 2-3 months from now when we play them again in the first round? And just giving our players the experience of, this is what this environment's going to be like. This is the type of player you're going to be playing against. And how can you rise to the occasion? And so I think that's been a big focus of ours. And we're trying to get, our team to kind of buy into, like, that's what our goal is too. So what are the things we're going to have to do to reach that? And we talk a lot, like, we want to be a next level team. What does that look like? And we even were talking about it yesterday at training. We were asking specific people, like, to you, what does it mean to be next level? And, you had one girl who said, well, it means I've done, I've set goals and I've done my pre-practice planning and I've done my visualization so that I know what I need to do. Another girl, well, it means like the intensity level is high and the level of execution is really high. And another player is, it means we're pinging passes, we're getting into tackles, we're doing all these things. So how do we take everybody's idea of what next level is and make it tangible amongst our players, but also then that's what the goal is. That's what we're striving towards. And so it's a little results based, but I think the process of being next level, that can happen no matter what happens with the results. And so I guess for our overall season, that's kind of what our goal is. I don't know if we have officially stated like this is our team goal, but that's what it is. So that's what it is for the fall. And then, long term, my boss says a lot, like, we want to be the premier team in our conference. That doesn't mean that we win every year, but it means that we're always in the conversation. It means that teams know this is our style of play. This is what our players look like. When you come to play us, this is what you're going to get. And so that's kind of a longer term objective, is just continuing to recruit players who are going to fit that, being able to get people on board to just support our program and our team, to kind of help us get the things we need to continue ascending. So long answer to your short question.
A great answer once again, but I think that's great in terms of, rather than setting an objective, right, we're going to win the cup or we're going to do this, you set a really nice sort of entry point and an open opportunity. We want to be a next level team. So again, that's subjective, but it gives a great point whereby then you can actually address and go, right, we've achieved this, what's next? Or right, we've achieved this, what's next? So if you're playing, say, one of the other big schools and you lost to them in game one and then game two, some of the players could be like, oh, last time they had X, Y, and Z playing, they were quicker, they were fitter. They might be given some, areas of why the other team were better. But that actually has gone, you've moved on. You might say, right, we've done this, we've done that, we need to focus on this. But what's important now is the game in front of us today. We've had 3 months since our last game. We've become quicker, we've become fitter, we've become more experienced. So how are we that next level team? The next level is to beat them. So you beat them that game, right, we're at the next level now. So then
a billion is a big number, bigger than a million.
That's my Amazon going off for whatever reason there. Apologies. But that next level there, you can actually then, it gives a great opportunity to start accelerating through. So I think just posing that scenario, that situation, however, whoever's listening wants to frame that, I think that is such a just simple, but so fantastic to really push through the ranks over the course of the season. So it's going to be interesting how you become that next level team over the year and how that sort of objective and situation plays out. So, for a reflection point at this time next year, I think it's going to be a fantastic year to sort of look even for, the institution, for the program, but also for your own personal progression as well, in terms of how that comes across as well. So I think that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking forward to it. We have a match later today. And at the end of training yesterday, part of the reason we had that conversation is because, it wasn't the world's greatest training session. I mean, it's a pregame practice, so you're doing some box work and finishing and stuff, but there were things that were going on that it was just like, hey, we feel really good. We won our first game. We're feeling ourselves, but we've got 19 more to go. And a next level team doesn't just decide when they want to be switched in or when they want to be switched off. Like, to us, a next level team executes all the time. And so even in these practices where, yeah, it's a little more relaxed, but you should be putting things on frame. You should be finishing chances. Your services should be crisp. You should be playing to the proper foot, all these things. And so we're just trying to use it as a little bit of a reset of, be excited. We won our game, but what's important now? We have a game tomorrow and we haven't won it yet. So what are we going to do to make that happen? But yeah, I think it's just, you have the big end goal in mind, and then how do you get people from like point to point along that journey? So
I love that, and I think that is such a great question, the way that you pose that as well, and how you get from that journey from, say, point A to point B, but then what happens in between that as well. So you've got a game today, which sounds great, and you had a training session yesterday, and you know, when you approach a game and you set up, so what are the expectations for your players? So they come and meet at a certain time, and then the dressing room is theirs, and then you come in and disseminate information, or do you have an expectation for the way you want them to be in the dressing room and then go out into a warm-up? How do you sort of deliver and have an expectation for your match day for the players as soon as they arrive?
We've definitely done a few different things over the last couple of years and tried to tweak it based off of the feedback we've gotten from them. You know, last year we would do a big scout the night before. We'd give them all this information. We thought it was really helpful. And then some of the players were like, well, now all I'm thinking about all night is the other team. And I've stopped focusing on the things I need to do. So we're like, okay, we'll give you maybe we'll do it the day of, and we'll give you a little bit less information. Because we don't want you focusing so much on them that you stop thinking about the things you need to do. But you need to have this information to know how they're going to play or set pieces they're going to run and things like that. So what we do this year, what we've done so far this year, you know, they get together, they have pregame meal. Once they're done with pregame meal, we bring them in and we go over our scout. And it's pretty brief. I mean, we'll try to hit a few points. Maybe they press a certain way, or, you know, maybe they have a couple key players and this is how they're going to try to play. So this is what we need to do. I do think we try to keep the focus on, can we assert our style of play on them and not try to adapt too much to what they're going to do, because we want to be a possession-based team. So if we have the ball, they're going to have to react to us, as opposed to us, you know, completely changing formations to combat whatever it is they're going to do, but being prepared to know maybe what their tendencies are. So we do a little bit of a scout. And then they've got about an hour and a half before they kind of have to go out for warm-ups. And so I know our team, they love a good pregame dance party. So they have a wild dance party in their locker room that thankfully I don't have to be a part of, but they get after it. And then usually with about an hour to go before the game, they'll kind of do like a pre-activation. They'll, you know, get some foam rollers, do some band work, just kind of get a little bit loose. And then about 30 minutes before the game, they're out on the field doing their dynamic warm-up and do a couple minutes of some long balls. We do a little bit of possession and some finishing. I mean, our warm-up's pretty short compared to other places I've been, which I like. And I mean, I think we took it, you know, there's nothing new in soccer. So I think we borrowed it from the national team, just kind of their pattern of how they warm up. But yeah, I mean, on a game day, they know they got to eat pregame meal, and then it's really move into scout, and then they've got some downtime if they need to go see the athletic trainer and get treatments. And then whatever they need to do, some of our ladies don't want the pregame dance party, so they kind of go and find a quiet place to do some visualization or just mental rehearsals. Other people really need the release of the dance party, so they go and do that. And then we all go out and warm up together. So it's a fun process, and, you know, lots of good energy before you get out there and get to it.
And it sounds great in terms of how you approach that, and obviously those reflection points in terms of what you may have done the day before or how that has changed as well. So I think it's great how you approach that, and it's great that players have some ownership over that. But then it also gives a great level of sort of degree whereby there's a lot of opportunity to sort of go, right, at this point we're doing that, at this point we're doing that, and gives a lot of structure before you approach a game, and therefore those coping mechanisms are in place because the players know what's expected of them and how to approach it. And when it comes down to selecting that team, then do you sort of go off the shape that you have? Do you go off the players that are available? Do you slot in two players and build around them? Or do you pick on minutes? Do you pick on lack of minutes? Do you pick on performance? How does a typical, say, week-to-week lineup look like for you and your head coach?
My head coach, his name's John Maravich, for those listening. He is a very science guy. He loves data. And so, as I mentioned, we use Player Maker, but we also have heart rate monitors that we use to kind of track players' workloads throughout the week. And so for us, we play Thursday, Sundays, our normal game schedules. So we played a match on Thursday. And so we try to bear in mind kind of what maybe some of those players who had to play 90 minutes, like what their workload was. And going we give them the start, maybe they're still able to perform at a level that's high, but we know, it's a Sunday game, so maybe they're going to need a break at some point. And so kind of having then, that next wave of players who are ready and prepared, who are probably a little bit fresher, can we bring them in to sort of give them a break? Or maybe there's someone who we have a couple of our midfielders they're both really solid players. They play the same position, and we just kind of flip-flop depending on what the needs of that match are going to be. They're different players, and so they have different strengths, and knowing, okay, we're going to need the ball on the floor, and this person really helps us connect and helps with our build. This is a game for them to start, knowing their counterpart is also going to play significant minutes. They kind of know, I mean, they're both upperclassmen, they're great, so they know it's not a like, oh, I'm not good enough to start. It's this is what this game calls for. We need you both. You're both going to play. You're both leaders and major contributors. So how do we find this balance between the two of you? But yeah, so we do try to look at numbers to see what people's workloads have been and see how do we manage this game, knowing we have a long season ahead. And then even throughout the course of the game, we're tracking players' heart rates and sort of what their loads are and seeing, all right, this person's probably reaching the point where they're about to need a sub. So can we get somebody ready to go in for them? Managing injuries, obviously, and knowing, all right, this person is not available. So that kind of changes what this lineup's going to look like. Mm-hmm. But we evaluate throughout trainings and throughout the year and see who's performing well and who's going to do what. And so it's definitely not a set, this is what our lineup is for the rest of the season. We will probably see some changes as some people come back from injury, or as hopefully not, but probably some people will get injured. So just trying to manage everybody throughout that.
And very interesting. It's great to hear how you select the team and how that goes into play. And just over the course of a season, you got quite a large group. That's typical, and it's a collective group. But you find then naturally, without defining players in terms of, say, two different groups, do you find yourselves looking at, say, right, this is Group A, which are, our highest, quality players, the players who are focused, the players who are most technical, etc. And then the players who sort of filter into Group B, who are maybe not as committed, maybe not as driven, maybe not as technical. And, over that course of the season, do you naturally find a Group A and a Group B without defining it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that our players struggle from a lack of drive or commitment. I think it probably comes down a little bit more to maybe there's some athletic differences. Maybe this person is just they're able to cover more ground, or they're a little bit quicker. That might put them in a different space than maybe somebody who just doesn't have quite the same level of speed. And so, say for instance, like you're a front runner. Well, speed's pretty important to be a front runner. So unless you can suddenly make yourself really, really fast, like there's going to be a bit of a separation. Maybe there's things you can do to offset that. You know, you can be super technical, you can help us defensively, you can do other things. But it might be tough to kind of overcome that initially. I think too, probably just looking at the numbers, you know, our roster, if you take out our injured players, we have about 22 healthy bodies right now. Well, obviously only 11 people are on the field at a time. So not everybody's going to be in the game. And so it's just kind of trying to balance that group that maybe they're struggling to find the field. Can you give them maybe something else to aspire to? So if you have a roster of 30 people and you're in 26 through 30, what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Like, getting on the field might be too far. So maybe you want to make it to the travel roster. So like when we travel, we take 22 players with us. If your goal is to like get on the bus, that means you've moved yourself up from 24 or 26 to 30. You've moved yourself up to at least 22. So looking at that as kind of something to achieve, that might be a more attainable goal than necessarily getting onto the field. And so having those conversations with players about like, what is something that you could try to get, you know, don't have your heart set on, well, my goal is if I don't play 90 minutes, I'm a failure. That's probably not going to be very good or healthy for you. So what can we do to kind of have something that you can achieve? And that might make it a little more, it won't be as big of a struggle, like you said, to just feel like, well, I'm stuck in like the B group and I'm never going to get out. You know, can you give them something else to try to strive for and achieve? So I do think over the course of the year, you probably have a bit of a natural, like, here's the top 20 people that we really, really trust and are really going to get a lot of playing time. But, you know, can you get one or two of those outliers to kind of pop up into that group? Assuming that like maybe someone's going to get a nick and they're going to be out, you know, can you move one of those people up? So, yeah.
I think that's such a great insight, and it wraps up in terms of how you approach your team, how you support them, how the players look, team selection, match day, training scenarios, situations, rehearsals, how you incorporate data, how you approach your season, the season that you got up and coming for the year ahead, reset points, reflection points, and just wraps up such a great conversation, and being able to fit this in, especially early in the morning and on a match day, following a training day as well, just how committed you are. And I really appreciate it. But before you go and before you know, I'll give you some downtime before your game, I'm just going to throw some quick fire questions at you, which I do with every other guest on the pod.
All right, ready.
Superb. If you had to have something to describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
3 words. I would like to be described as competent, confident, and amiable.
Ooh, 2 new words I've not had before, so well done to you.
Thank you.
If you could move to any country and coach, where would it be?
This is not biased. I'm not saying this just because you're from England, but I would love to end up in England at some point. So.
Well, I'm just going to shoot you there. I'm not from England. I'm from Wales.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't take any offence to that. I just get that in there. Welsh podcast.
Oh, Welsh, my apologies. Hey, Wales is a great place too. I wouldn't mind being in Wales.
Hey, well, for us, we don't have such a strong game as the English, so a lot of Welsh coaches end up coaching the English game anyway. So for the last 6 years, I've coached at an English/Welsh club. So Welsh club based in Wales plays in the English league. So.
Gotcha. My apologies.
No, it's completely fine. Honestly, no offence taken. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
I would pick Emma Hayes. Chelsea, love her.
Top choice. Who was or is your role model?
Oh gosh. There have been a few. I do think the man who was my coach when I was a player, not when I was a player, I didn't appreciate him as much as then when I became his assistant. I just think he took a chance on bringing me in. He definitely models the human and relationship side of things. His name is John McGilvery. And yeah, so I would say he was definitely a role model and a mentor. Probably more on a grander scale. I have much respect for Serena and just the things that she's been able to accomplish. So I would also have to throw her out there.
Top choices, top choices. What if you had the choice of any job that was out there in terms of coaching and it was available to you? What job would you take?
I grew up in Michigan, and my favorite university is the University of Michigan. I love Jen Klein, who's there now. So Jen, I'm not coming for your job, but if a job opened there, I would definitely have to give it a shot so that I could be a Wolverine.
Love that. If you weren't coaching, what else would you be doing?
I actually went to school for digital media. The ultimate dream was to make documentary films. So I would either like to be a documentary filmmaker or a film critic. Those would be my other choice.
Very interesting, and who knows whether one could play out in the coaching world and you could lead on documentaries for American state sports.
That's right.
Oh, interesting. Who is your all-time favorite player?
I'm a big Lauren Holiday fan. I just think the work that she put in as a 6 for us was so unnoticed. I mean, we obviously noticed she was a national team player and she was great, but I think it's been a struggle finding a true 6 for the women's national team after she's kind of been gone. I do think we've had some players who've stepped up, but I think she was one of our last just like stalwarts in the midfield. And then just from a personal standpoint, like she's an awesome human. So
great choices. What is your biggest pet peeve in coaching?
I don't personally love when I hear male coaches address their female players as honey. That's just it just really grinds my gears. So if you're a male coaching females out there, don't call them honey. Don't refer to them as that. So
I remember watching the West Ham women's documentary on BBC iPlayer a couple of years ago, and he had a coach, Matt Beard. I think he's at Liverpool now. And part of the documentary, he actually kissed one of the female players on the cheek. And that, for me, it just never sat right with me. I was like, why? Like, why is that okay? Why would you even do that?
Would you do that to a boy? No.
Yeah, it never sat comfortable with me, that.
Yeah. And I know, I mean, I've worked with many great men who are great coaches of women, so I'm not against men coaching women, but just try not to refer to them as honey, you know?
Yeah, simple things for sure. What is your favorite thing to do in your downtime?
Building off my previous answer, I'm a big movie buff. I love going to the theater or watching movies at home. COVID was a really tough time because the movie theaters were closed. So I love going to the movies.
So what's your favorite film then?
All-time favorite film? Oh gosh, that's a tough one. For nostalgia's sake, I would have to say the first favorite film I ever had was the animated Beauty and the Beast way back in the day. First animated film to ever be nominated for Best Picture for the Oscars. So it's a great movie, not just a great animated film.
Great choice for sure. What are your 3 non-negotiables in coaching?
Like for what I want from my players or for...
Yeah, from your players, yeah.
For my players, I would say respect is a non-negotiable. I'll respect you. You need to respect me. I think effort is a non-negotiable. I can't teach you to work hard. I can't like put that into you. And so for me, hard work and effort is kind of a bare minimum. And then I would say just an openness to new experiences, whether that's the players you're going to interact with. Like you might have teammates who are from totally different worlds than you. Your coach might ask you to play in a different position, but if you're just so rigid and like, well, I only play center back, that's all I can be, it might be tough for you to find a home, and we want to help you think outside the box. So yeah, respect, effort, and just an openness to new things.
Love that. If you could recommend one book, what would it be?
Oh man. One book. It's a real easy read, and we actually just read it with the seniors on our team. It's called Make Your Bed. It's by a former admiral in the U.S. Navy. It's just kind of some points for life that he has learned throughout his time as being a Navy SEAL and being in the Navy. Real simple read. It's very short, but I think just some good things about how to manage the stuff that life's going to throw at you. And I think it's been helpful for our senior class, and for us as coaches, we've been able to refer back to that a lot. So that's just the most recent one I would suggest. So Make Your Bed.
Okay, good book. Definitely love that. What does reflection mean to you?
I think reflection can have many meanings. I think for me, reflection implies your ability to kind of look inside and look at yourself and see the decisions you've been making, the way you've been acting, your thought process, what are areas you need to grow in. When I think of reflection, those are things I think about. I think the other aspect is, are you helping other people reflect? Just through the way that you behave, do you model reflection so that they want to see that for themselves? So kind of it's reflecting off of me back to you. But yeah.
Strong answer. Love that. And you've answered this at the start, but it's always nice to finish on as a final point and to wrap up on. Well, what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
My favorite part about coaching is just the people that I get to work with. Soccer or football has helped me meet all kinds of people from all different places that I otherwise would never have been able to interact with, even such as yourself. And so just having that ability through the game has been pretty awesome.
Love that. And that wraps up such a great episode and time spent with you this morning / this afternoon. And it's been such a great natural conversation, which has taken us on such a journey, but one that I really appreciate. And I'm glad that we could get this arranged and fit this in. But I wish you the best luck in the game today, and best of luck for the season ahead. And it's going to be an interesting one for sure. But it's a big thanks from me for being part of the podcast and getting this arranged. And it's been a wonderful time speaking to you.
Agreed. Yeah, I didn't have any expectations, and no, it was a great chat. It was a pleasure for sure.
Well, thank you very much. Take care, and again, best of luck for today, and I'm sure you'll do well.
Thanks. We'll be in touch.
Love that. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
We just had so many players who are so overwhelmed with just all the other expectations that are being put on them. You got to be a good student. You've got to be a professional athlete, basically. At this level, you've got to, still have a social life. You've got to try to figure out who you're going to be as a person. I mean, that's just a lot going on.